उमज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुर्मिलितं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. So here we are, continuing with our study of Śrī Śrī Upadeśāmṛta, the Nectar of Instruction by Srila Rupa Goswami. And we have arrived at verse number 2. And yeah, and I also would just like to say how wonderful last week's meeting was, at least for myself. And I was reflecting on it the whole week, and it just brought me to a new level of awareness, right? We were discussing these 6 urges that we all have to contend with in our conditioned bodies. And so, yeah, it just brought me to a higher awareness of how these different urges play out in different instances of our daily lives. And so I was very grateful for that meeting and excited to go into the second verse. And we can remember, right, what was mentioned last week about that we see this pattern, right, in the presentations of our gurus, that when there's a presentation of a progression of devotion, in the first stage, you'll always see a clearing period, right? That there's pulling out the weeds, there's cleaning the ground, cleaning the earth. And this is all part of creating a strong foundation, right? Then building something beautiful on top of that. And so the first verse, we're discussing the 6 urges. And the second verse, we're discussing, Srila Rupa Goswami is discussing 6 defects, which will help us, if we can avoid, will help us in our practice of devotion. And we mentioned last week, right, that our brain just likes this type of like constructive, systematic way of analyzing things. We like lists, right? It kind of makes everything more like containable within our brains and within the field of our practice, right? So it's nice, it's catchy, something you can remember. 6 bad things, 6 good things, 6 urges, and so on. It's very yeah, it just makes it all more accessible and easier to practice and apply, more manageable, a little more like bite size, you could say, right? So these 2 verses of Upadeśāmṛta, they're both focusing on the negative side, clearing away the negative side. And then after that, we'll go into the positive focus. So yes, we can go on. Atyahara prayashascha pajalpa niyamagraha janasangascha lalyam cha shadbir bhaktir vinashyati. So atyahara, over accumulation, right? And literally, this word atyahara, ati ahara, literally it means overeating. Ati means like too much. Ahara is referring to eating, right? Like we hear that expression, the 4 activities of the condition of all living entities in the material world, right? Oh, now it's gone out of my head. I'm sure someone can say. Ahara, nidra, bayam, maitunam cha, right? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. These are the universal actions of every living entity in this world, whether human, animal, insect, or whatever it may be. So that's ahara, right? That's actually referring to eating. But the implication is not just, there's a broader, field of connotation there. It's not literally referring only to eating, but to collecting too much of anything. And so that can refer to pretty much anything, whether it's food, whether it's knowledge, whether it's shoe collection, or whatever it is, this tendency to accumulate, to over collect. Then prayashash is referring to over endeavor, right? Endeavoring too much, working too hard for something that's very insignificant, that doesn't have any real meaning, is not is not worthy of such endeavor. That is what is also mentioned here as harmful to our practice of devotion. Then prajalpo, I think everybody knows that, is referring to worldly talk, unnecessary worldly talk. It is, Śrīla Sridhar Maharaj explains that it harms our faith, right? When we give too much importance and we indulge in too much talk to things that are ultimately of a temporary nature and have temporary relative meaning. Of course, we don't completely, reject that. And we're human beings living in the world, and we have to navigate lots of things, and we're not living in a vacuum or living in a cave. But we keep some perspective, right? We keep some, although we may engage in such talk at times throughout our day, we keep perspective, right? We don't let ourselves become consumed by these things, and we understand the broader context of this whole world being a temporary experience, and that understanding that we have a higher spiritual goal and purpose. And then this niyamagraha has a double meaning. Here, the translation has put it as misapplication of rules. And literally what it means is the word niyam means rule or regulation. And then depending on whether you have a long A or a short A on that agraha, as I understand, it's here in the word for word as well. Agraha is referring to negligence. Agraha is referring to over-eagerness or obsession, as it's put here. So it actually has a double meaning, and it means to be either too rigid and too strict, too hung up on following the rules and the letter of the law, or to be too lax about them, to be too neglectful of them. Both of these approaches to rules are unhelpful, right? The rules in and of themselves are not, the goal. The goal of our life is not to just follow rules and shoulds and shouldn'ts, but the goal of our life is something much deeper, right? The goal of our life is Krishna prema, divine love. And so if a rule is supporting the cultivation of that higher ends, then we should follow it. But on the other hand, sometimes some rules may inhibit that, right? Some rules may be more applicable to other persons or other circumstances. So sometimes in pursuit of the higher goal of divine love and Vaishnava Seva, all these things, then we may need to be more relaxed in our application of the rules. I'll give one classic example that comes to mind is the rule about Ekadashi, right? Actually, according to our scriptures, one is supposed to fast fully on Ekadashi. Many people today still follow that, won't even take a drop of water on Ekadashi. This is the rule. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur modified that because he recognized, he pointed out, what is the real purpose of Ekadashi? It is actually to please Krishna. And if you're doing a full fast, then for most persons, they'll incapacitate themselves. They won't be able to do any seva. They won't be able to do anything. They'll just be in bed all day if they can't eat or drink, right? Most people, it's gonna hold them back. And Ekadashi really is a day when we try to offer more service and have more remembrance, more devotional practice and offering. We try to give, because Krishna is more hungry on Ekadashi, more hungry for connection with his devotees. And so in response to that, we want to try to offer more. But if we're incapacitated, we're not eating and drinking and we're just in bed, then we can't do anything. So Saraswati Thakur modified that rule and said, well, we will do anukalpa, means like close to fasting. So he established a practice of just fasting till noontime, skipping breakfast. And I can mention too that our Gurudev, because I'm a little sad sometimes I see in some of our temples that they are serving breakfast on Ekadashi, but I myself observed at least twice where Gurudev, he personally emphasized that he preferred that. We will try to skip breakfast on Ekadashi. Try to stretch ourselves a little bit, unless of course you have a health condition, that's another thing. But anyway, Saraswati Thakur instituted that we fast until noon on Ekadashi. And then after that, we take anukalpa. So we will skip grains and so on, and take more simple food, fruits, vegetables, some nuts. Yeah, so that's an example, right, of breaking the rules, but following what is the spirit of the rule. Right? Let us follow what is that saying? Not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. That's what this niyamagraha means, right? And then so I've just given the example of being like too strict. Because see, this is a part of all of this, right? That often, not always, but often, perhaps it's 50-50, or it could be more than 50. But a large number of persons who are very, very strict on following scriptural rulings, they take that approach because they want to gain something from that, right? Like they'll read some obscure scriptural reference. If you follow this, every year, you'll go to heaven or you'll gain wealth and all these things, right? So they're being really strict because they have this type of calculative approach towards religious practice, right? One of our devotees here, he told this story, and this was back when I was living in Navadvip, and one of our Western devotees participated in this village preaching program, and they were there for some days, and they happened to be there on Ekadashi. And he was astonished to see how strictly many of the villagers followed Ekadashi. They were up at 3 a.m. They did a Nagar Sankirtan, like in the early morning, went on some long outside kirtan, and were strictly fasting and all these things, and our godbrother was very impressed, and he mentioned it to one of the villagers. Oh, I'm so impressed to see how you're following Ekadashi so strictly. And then that villager said to him, oh, haven't you heard of all the things that you can get from following this Ekadashi? So, you can, get a beautiful wife or a husband and, gain wealth and the blessings of the goddess of knowledge for education, all these kinds of ideas, right? So that is one issue for perhaps the majority of, or at least a good number of those who take this very strict approach. And there are others who are very sincerely just inclined to renunciation, right? But ultimately, that's something dry. And ultimately, what we're interested in is devotion. And Krishna, actually, Krishna doesn't care how sinful you are or how renounced you are. Of course, this is a radical and dangerous thing to say, but this is stated in Bhagavad Gita. He's not interested in either of those things. He's interested in the devotion in your heart. He's interested in how much devotional inclination you have. That is the actual principle of bhakti, right? So ultimately, even if one is very earnestly, very sincerely, very excellently, expertly following so many practices of renunciation, where will that ultimately take one? It can take one to a point of liberation, right? But it cannot take us into our full-fledged nature as loving servitors of the Lord, right? Welcome, Bimal Krishna Prabhu and also Divi Shakti Didi joined, and Ananta Shesh and Krishna and Jani. Happy to have you all with us. Very nice turnout today. So yeah, I mean, this topic, Niyamagraha, we could talk about this for hours, you know. And we can also say that this is also related to the principle of Yukta Vairagya, right? The principle of Yukta Vairagya, which translates to more or less properly adjusted renunciation, proper renunciation, or sometimes rendered as renunciation in devotion, right? In other words, that we're not taking a hardline approach about renunciation, but we are rather using everything as is appropriate in the service of Krishna, seeing everything in connection to Krishna, right? Rather than rejecting something because we're afraid it's going to entangle us in the net of Maya, we're rather embracing everything and offering to Krishna, engaging in the service of Krishna. This is the principle of Yukta Vairagya, which the Goswamis wrote about in their writings, and then Saraswati Thakur applied in quite a serious way in his preaching mission, to the point that he published on the front cover of every edition of his magazine, the Gaudiya, which was a regular magazine. I don't remember if it was weekly or monthly. He had a weekly, he had a monthly, and he had a daily magazine. Like that was the scope of Saraswati Thakur's mission. It's quite extraordinary. But anyhow, on the two verses of Rupa Goswami, which are from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the one verse is defining Yukta Vairagya, proper renunciation, and the second verse is defining Falgu Vairagya, which means false renunciation, useless renunciation. Anasaktasya vishayam yatarham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam uchate. This is the definition of Yukta Vairagya, to be personally detached from everything of this world, and it's simultaneously to see everything in connection with Krishna and to use it in the service of Krishna. This is Yukta Vairagyam. To see it near Nirbandha Sambandha, in connection with Krishna, see everything within the context of its relationship with Krishna, right? And then the second verse, which I don't have memorized, describing false renunciation, it's more or less along the lines of what we just discussed. Someone who's actually motivated by the goal of their own advancement. I think it specifically mentions liberation. Someone motivated by their own liberation, who strictly follows principles of renunciation, that is false. That is false renunciation. That is ultimately useless. Right? I didn't actually mention that category, right? Strictly following, because the calculated approach takes two forms, right? Calculated in terms of material gain, but then there's also calculated in terms of spiritual gain, right? I.e., liberation. So this is all related really to this principle of niyamagraha. So, and it's a nuanced thing, right? It's something that won't always be clear to us, you know, what's the right thing. And sometimes, right, there may be cases where we feel that actually this is a rule that doesn't really need to be followed, but I'm just going to keep the peace, you know, because someone's asking me to do it. Or we may feel I'm not in a position to make that call, practically speaking. We may, with some humble feeling, think, well, actually, you know, I don't think this is really necessary, but at the same time, you know, in my humble position, better play it safe, right? But then there will be cases where you know, it may be that you know, we're being called to seva that may entail breaking some rule. Just a simple example that comes to mind. Someone's needed to do puja. You're dirty. You're very dirty. But you've been called to do the seva. Then what do you say? Oh no, I can't do it because of this and this and this, and I'm too dirty, and I don't have much practice. I can't do it. But it's it's 6 o'clock. The pujari's gone AWOL, and they need you. Then you take. I would say the mood of devotion is you take the risk. Maybe I'll make some offense. I'm not clean. I don't even know if I can do it properly, but the service is required. So I'll just do it, right? Oh, there will be 1,000,001 different permutations, right, of this question that will come up in our lives of service. And it's a privilege that we get to make these decisions and mature in the process. And sometimes we may get it right, other times we may get it wrong, but we're growing along the way, right? But this is the main principle, right? That we want to, Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he gave that definition. Service means doing the needful, right? And that pretty much trumps everything else. So what, ultimately Krishna consciousness is very practical, Like someone was asking me once, so do you do a lot of meditation? Somehow in the world, people have this stereotype that spiritual people just sit in meditation all day long, And I mean, I do get asked that quite a lot, actually. And so I remember once I said, well, the thing is, what if Krishna needs something and we're sitting there with our eyes closed? Like that's not very helpful. Of course we do little, right? We chant our Gayatri mantra. It doesn't take that long, but it's not like we sit and do hours of meditation and silence and all these things. We're practical people. And it's about developing a relationship with the Lord and his devotees. So, if we're like, Vaishnava asks us to do something, oh, I've taken a vow of silence, or I need to sit and do my 2 hours of meditation, I'm reminded of the story of the Brahmins, right? That's such a charming story that we hear in Bhagavatam, when Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys, they're all playing in one area of Vrindavan, and they're very hungry, and then they observe this group of Brahmins doing some grand sacrifices and chanting big mantras, and there's food offerings involved. And so some of the cowherd boys go and tell them, the Brahmins, oh, Krishna and Balaram are here nearby and they're very hungry. Do you think you could give us some food, please? And the Brahmins just ignore them. They're very absorbed in their rituals. They don't know who these scruffy boys are. And besides, they haven't even finished making their offerings. It's not prasadam yet. And so they don't even respond. They just ignore them. And so the boys go back and they report to Krishna and Balaram. And Krishna and Balaram say, okay, go ask their wives. And meanwhile, these ladies, they've been waiting for this moment their whole lives. They've never met Krishna, but they've heard about him. They're already in love with him. And they just jump at the opportunity. Right? And so they have this wonderful chance to offer direct service to Krishna, and they bring all these wonderful offerings to Krishna. Later on, those Brahmins realize how foolish they were. And there's a verse, Śrīla Śrī Maharaj includes it in Prapana Jivanamrita, where there's these verses, these Brahmins are condemning themselves, and they're saying, oh, to hell with our Brahmin birth, to hell with our sacrifices, to hell with all of our knowledge. The Supreme Lord himself came to us and we couldn't recognize him, because they were so involved in their ritual, right? So that's one very nice example to remember in this regard. But of course, it's a very tricky and nuanced subject matter. And as I said before, there are some cases where it's better just to veer on the side of caution and to follow the conventional rule. Because the thing is too, like once you get, being too loose about the rules can be like a slippery slope, right? Where you're like, oh, okay, this isn't so important. Then before you know it, like you're not following anything, right? So that's what this Niyamagraha is saying, like not to be too strict, not to be too loose, right? But to take that middle ground, right? And to try to follow the rules that are supportive, right, of our life of devotion. So, and our sincerity will also guide us, our sincerity of heart. We also hear sometimes that, the tendency of the devotees is actually to follow the rules, right? Because they feel they're unqualified to break any rules. But that Krishna's tendency is to always encourage his devotees to break the rules, right? This is, of course, at a certain level, at a more advanced stage of devotion that Krishna likes to try to, Krishna, he's a crooked person, actually. He's divinely crooked. And he's mischievous. Gurudev, he told this story of this one devotee, Madhava, in Puri, Jagannath Puri, Orissa, and how he had like some dream from Jagannath or something like that, asking him to steal some jackfruit. Like he had some very detailed dream where he got this instruction to steal this jackfruit from someone's garden, and so he and he's like a very simple, Vaishnava, doesn't want to break any rule, but he goes and follows the order. He gets captured, he gets beaten, and he tries to explain himself, and then finally he is absolved, because then there's some, I can't remember all the details. I don't know if anyone here knows this story. There's some incident where he makes an offering, it's just he makes an offering privately, but then they find some of that food stuff on the mouth of Jagannath. There's some incident like that, and so then it's recognized. Rishabhanavi looks like he remembers that story. And so it's recognized that, oh, he is actually a great devotee. And so, they apologize. But at the same time, Krishna was quite naughty, getting his devotee into trouble. So these types of things go on. Anyhow, Niyamagraha, again, this is a really large subject matter we can talk about for a long time, but maybe I'll just pause there. Jana Sangash, right? I mean, like ultimately we'll just develop our own sense of discrimination, right? And we'll follow that to the best of our ability. What's important, what's less important, what to follow strictly, what we can be more relaxed about. And that will evolve over time, right? What we consider to be everything on day one, after some years that will change, right? We will develop a more refined conception of what is truly important, what is truly essential, and what is not. Okay, so the next thing on the list here, Jana Sangash, which is referring to bad association or association with non-devotees, as it is saying here. And then I have to leave time because we're going to read through Śrīla Śrīda Maharaj's comments as well. Then, but yeah, and this is actually quite important. In one place, I don't know if it's going to come up in our reading, but in one place, Śrīla Śrīda Maharaj says that if we can remove all forms of bad association, we're like 90% there. Because our soul, our inner nature is inherently attracted to Krishna, right? We naturally want to run to Krishna. And the only reason that we can't do so is that there's association with other lower persons or concepts. Association, there's a broader scope of meaning there, right? Association means association with worldly ideas, right? Actually, association means where we are putting our faith, right? And how we are associating with different worldly conceptions, right? And that, may be personified in people that we associate with physically or put our faith in and communicate with faith. So Śrī Śrī Maharaj made the point, if we will remove all forms of bad association, we're almost there, right? The magnetism can act, right? As our Gurudev would say, Krishna is like a magnet, right? And we are like iron particles, or it is our nature to be attracted to the magnetism of Krishna. So therefore, if we clear the way, allow that magnetism to act, then it will be a straightforward thing. We can also think of it as like, we're not filling up our consciousness with so many, other ideas, right? That, it's like for example, you're going for a family dinner. There's going to be lots of wholesome home cooked food, but on the way you stop, at Burger King or Pizza Hut, fill up with junk food, fast food. Then once you get to your family home and you have to sit and pretend, to be interested, pretend to be hungry, it's not going to be such an enjoyable experience, and you won't really appreciate the value and the nuanced flavor and the wonderful nutrition that you're getting in that home-cooked meal, right? Because you're already full. You've already filled yourself up. So in the same way, if we're very busy in associating with very worldly persons, with very worldly conceptions, and putting ourselves, exposing ourselves to a lot of that. And nowadays, of course, with modern technology, it's so easy to get sucked in, social media and various news platforms, YouTube and all these things. So if we're filling up our consciousness with all these things, then there's not that much room left. And when we go and expose ourselves to some harikatha, to some higher talk, it won't make much of an indentation because we're already full. There wasn't much space left in our consciousness. We're not hungry. That's what I mean to say. We're not hungry. We've already eaten. We're already full. We spoiled our appetite with fast food, right? So we need to leave some space in our consciousness, some space for Krishna. Then the sixth point here, laulyam. This is sometimes you'll see in some translations, it's given as greed. But the version that is given by Śrī Śrī Maharaj and other acharyas is actually something else, fickleness, right? A fickleness of our mind, right? To go, and again, this is something that we're very vulnerable to in the modern age because it's so easy to indulge all these whims. We've got everything at on our fingertips, right? In pretty much every sphere of life. Food, entertainment, and so on. So it's so easy to indulge this fickle nature of the mind, right? Here, there, everywhere. I want this, I want that. Oh, look at those pretty colors over there. Look at those flashing lights over there. But what it does, right, is it splays our consciousness, right? And just kind of like skirting on the surface of things. So this is another quality that is unhelpful. Shadbir bhaktir vinashati. These 6 qualities, vinashati, they will destroy devotion. They're harmful. And, you know, we can consider, right, that if we're not we have to remember, right, that it's not that we're disqualified from the practice if we can't follow all these things, but just, you know, discussing, studying these things, it helps us to get some context. It helps us to refine our appreciation for what it is that we're trying to do, right? And for appreciating what is the ideal, and getting some a concept too of where we are on the path, right? Getting some context again. So, and of course, we are trying to practice and trying to be aware of these things as much as possible, and ultimately depending on mercy, right? Ultimately depending on grace. We're putting in some effort, and then the other half of the chemical reaction is grace, is mercy, right? Those are the 2 magic ingredients, our own effort and the Lord's mercy. So, okay, let's go on to find Śrī Śrī Upadeśāmṛta's. Oh, wait.
72.
Okay, hang on. We're in this beginning section. 72.
Yeah, maybe in the search bar, if you just type in 72, I think it should come.
Does that work? No.
No.
Too many 70s.
Too many 70s.
Yeah. Here we go. This will work. So for those of you who are following with the physical book, can jump ahead to 72.
Or you could type the first.
It's okay, we're here. Okay, so we're going to read now Śrī Śrī Upadeśāmṛta's illumination. So this is collected from different talks of Śrī Śrī Upadeśāmṛta. And welcome Anna, who's also just joined us from Portugal. Atyahara means to collect for ourselves whatever we come across. It means to feed ourselves more than necessary, but it also refers to the tendency to want or keep for ourselves some portion of whatever we collect. Prayas means false errands, enthusiastic attempts for undesirable false attainments. It refers to becoming too much adherent to any particular cause, except, of course, that of devotion. When one engages oneself to attain something, one devotes one's energy, one becomes mad. But we should not become so mad to go in any particular destination. So this is quite interesting. Śrī Śrī Upadeśāmṛta here is actually giving quite a high connotation here, that this can also refer to our devotional life, to be too fixed on some particular course of action in our service life, even. So he's not only discussing over-endeavoring in the material sense, but also to be fixed on one objective in our life of devotional service as well. Wait and see the wave. Try to read the divine wave. What is coming to us? How does it want us to adjust to the environment? We are to read that and go on. Once we have begun, having chosen a particular direction to start for, so many opposing currents will come. To only engage ourselves blindly in that will be a hindrance. So we are to practice yukta vairagya. We have to read. I will have to move to that side now, not this side. There should be no blind madness for any particular action. We must read the environment, the circumstances, and act accordingly, right? So to be open to the Lord's plan, right? Not too rigid, too fixed on our own conception of how to act in some circumstance. This is, of course, very high connotation of that word, that guidance. Prajalpa means indulgence in talking about ordinary things, slackness for entering into discussion of anything and everything. We should try to keep up our energy for service only, and not allow ourselves to discuss ordinary things, mundane topics. We should avoid all unnecessary discussion about mundane affairs. For example, one may have too much attraction for the newspaper to read about various topics, current events, war, and other unimportant things. This is where Śrī Śrī Maharaj is living, that have happened in one's area. Prajalpa means to unloose the rein of our self-control and allow ourselves to enter into discussion of anything and everything we find ourselves in. We find outside ourselves. Sometimes preachers should have some knowledge of the environment, so for that purpose they may read the newspaper, only to make their speech living and modern. They should keep some connection with modern things, so that their speech is not antiquated and they can speak with men of modern education. Their speech, their preaching will be living them, and otherwise it will be somewhat dead. Preachers should be acquainted with the present waves within time, but they should not be voracious readers of newspapers or any other news. Their object should always be to take advantage of the situation and what is going on around them. Niyamagraha means both to make much of a particular law and to ignore a law in total. Here, law means rulings that are given in the scriptures. For example, to be very firm about the rulings of the day of Ekadashi, we must fast wholesale without taking even a drop of water. The general rule, however, is that we must keep our body fit for the service of the Lord. So on the day of Ekadashi, we take something, some water, sherbet, or anukalpa. We should not be so strict about a particular ruling that the general law will be hampered. Rulings are always meant for a particular stage. After passing a particular stage, the rulings for that stage are no longer applicable to us. And we have to mark another set of rules. So we should not give extra or abnormal attention to any particular rule or neglect rules entirely, saying, I don't care for any scriptural rules, any vidhi. I want raga. I want everything to be spontaneous within me. To hate vidhi, this is referring to rules and regulations, is one form of niyamagraha. And to make too much of the rules, accepting only vidhi and leaving no chance for the internal flow of the heart, is also niyamagraha. Jana sangha means to like the company of the ordinary public, to be very eager to have the company of any man without consideration of whether we should mix with him or not. If anyone comes up to us, we begin talking and giving association to him. But we should have eagerness to mix with the sadhus of the higher class. Instead of that, if we allow ourselves to mix with the ordinary public in the name of preaching or collection or any other thing, that will be detrimental to our cause. Jana Sangha means to be very approachable to the public for politics, social work, feeding the poor, and this and that. So many conceptions of the ideal are all around us, and to allow ourselves to be chased, captivated, or captured by them is Jana Sangha. And of course, we can mention, right, it doesn't mean that we won't be non-sympathetic, right? I used to be so fanatic, many of us go through that stage when I was a teenager, super fanatic. And I went through a stage. We all go through different stages at a certain stage. But for example, I didn't like to give any money, like to beggars. I'm like, only for Krishna, But then I remember Gurudev gave a talk once, and he mentioned Śrī Śrī Maharaj used to give money to beggars, when he was out and about. Not that he's making a big campaign about it, but if he came across someone in the street, he would give them some rupee, something. And that was like a revolution for me. So it doesn't, these points don't mean that we won't be sympathetic, right, to our environment and difficulties people face, but we have perspective, right? And we understand the broader context of everything that is going on, and understand what our higher focus and goal is, right? And that the real social work is actually to awaken people to the root of their suffering and to connect them with their true prospect, right? And their true wealth and the true opportunity of this human birth, right? Okay, then next point. Laulya means softness of mind. Whatever we come across, we want to note that. When we go to the market, we find so many things, hundreds of things, and we feel as though anything and everything is coming to capture our attention. Whatever we find, we engage ourselves in that. Whatever proposal comes, we accept without consideration. This is laulya, a weakness of the heart, a weakness of our promise and our object of life. Laulya has other meanings also, that of softness towards the truth, amenability and humility, but these are different. Also, tatra laulyam ekalam mulam. Our earnestness, laulya, is the only price to attain divine love. Here, so Śrī Śrī Maharaj is speaking on these other connotations, right, of this word laulyam. As I mentioned, there are other translations given. Here in the Upadeśāmṛta, laulya means that we feel some weakness within ourselves for whatever is present before us. Without consideration, we accept anything and everything. This sort of attitude is laulya. Whatever comes, we participate in that without considering whether it will be beneficial or injurious. We take no time to think properly about this. This is laulya. We must save ourselves from these natures. These 6 are detrimental to devotion proper. Okay, so that was the second verse of Upadeśāmṛta. And now these are, this is a song written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur on this verse. And we can also mention, right, there are a number of songs, right, which have been composed, but based on these principles, Upadeśāmṛta, but one that we sing every day in our temples, which some of you may not be aware, is based on some of these verses of Upadeśāmṛta. Can anyone say which song that is? I know Ananda Krishna knows, but maybe Krishna Shran, can you say which song? Or anyone present, can you say which song do we sing every day in our temples, which is based on, Can anyone say? Bimal Prabhu, I'm sure you can say.
I'll probably get it wrong. I'm thinking Go He Vaishnava Thakur.
Yes, exactly. Oh, He Vaishnava Thakur. That's the one, exactly. We sing every evening in our temples. Vaishnava Thakur Doyara Sagra Eda Se Koruna Kori Diya Pada Chaya Shodo Heyamane Tomana Charanor Chaya Bega Domi. This is going to the second verse. Chaya Bega Domi. The 6 urges. Please subdue these 6 urges. Chaya Bega Domi. Chaya Dosha Shodhi. Please purify the 6 defects. That's referring to the second verse that we just went through. Chaya Guna Dehodas, or Choya Guna if you're saying Bengali way. And then please give me the 6 qualities that we will come to in the next verse. Then it also mentions the 6 kinds of association, which is mentioned in the 4th verse. So yeah, that's that's something that is nice to remember when we're singing that song, right? It's based on these verses, and it's indicated in other songs too, but that song in particular, well, at least we sing that regularly. And then some of these other songs Śrīla Śrīla Maharaj has included in Prapana Jivanamrita, and they can actually be sung. And perhaps some of them are in Sharanagati as well. I'm not sure about that. I have to check. Okay, well, I'm so happy to be doing this with all of you. We have a few minutes left. Does anyone want to bring up any thoughts, any questions, any doubts or shares before we close for today? And welcome Ananta Shesh, who joined, and also Ramananda Prabhu. Happy to have you with us. Bimal Prabhu, I'm sure you have something.
Vishaka Didi, Dandos for everybody.
Dandavat, Ramananda
Sorry, joined a
Prabhu.
little late.
Happy you could make it.
Dandavat Vishaka Didi. I will say, I watched your class last week. I missed it in the morning, but
Okay.
I will say this book though is incredible. I know it seems daunting, but there's just so much packed into the book. So many beautiful things. I mean, Guru Maharaj, in fact, like the next verse, his illumination on verse 3 is like one of my favorite things to read. If anyone is feeling kind of stuck or uninspired or feeling like you can't do this, that illumination is very inspiring and helps me to keep wanting to move forward. But anyway, there's just so much in this book. You know, Guru Maharaj talks about the Ramananda Sambad, and he's like Brihad Bhagavatamrita, like parts of that are in here. That he talks about the 10 offenses to the holy name, so many things. And the book seems big, but really it's kind of just broken up into different sections. Like in the back too, that's very helpful and also really great to read is Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes through each of the 6 faults and the 6 good qualities. He goes through each one and breaks it down, and it's really incredible to hear, because he elaborates and actually brings so much more out of it than what I mean, you think about, association or like giving up bad association, but like what does that mean? And like, for example, he breaks it down. He talks about association, because he talked in the section of Sangatyag, he talks about association. Well, there's association, but there's also attachment. So Sangha can be attachment or association. And he talks about, as far as attachment goes, like we can be attached to our own samskaras, or we can be attached to objects. And he breaks it all down. But it was interesting to me because I'm thinking of it in such a general way. But then it can go really deep. As we all know, they are able to bring, our acharyas are able to bring all these things out. And but it's helpful too for anyone who doesn't know. There is a glossary in the back, so if you don't understand maybe certain words that are being said, you can go and read through the glossary, and they give an explanation of certain words and things too. So there's a lot in the book that's helpful. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a speech on the banks of Radha Kund about Upadeśāmṛta, which is also very beautiful. So it's a huge, daunting book, but it's also packed with so much sweetness. Everything is here, like you said the other day at the class. But one thing, sorry, I'm talking too much. I forget to breathe sometimes. But anyway, my point being, there's so many things that we're trying to practice, controlling our speech, our mind, anger, good association, bad association, whatever it is. But like several times throughout this book, it says that what's the most important thing is just association with the devotees. And there's a part in the back that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's on page 477 if anyone's interested, and it basically starts at the top of the page, but he talks about all of the things that you can overcome just by associating with pure devotees and the Vaishnavas. So, we get hung up on our own faults or whatever. I do myself because I have many, but I just associating with the devotees is the most important thing. You know, doing service, serving them, serving Gurudev, reading the scriptures. Like, if we can do all of those things, these other things will naturally just fall away. You know, I think with obviously, because like you said, it's two parts. Like, we can try, but I mean, I can't do anything on my own. I've realized that a long time ago. So I'm depending on the mercy of you all. And anyway, happy to be here. I'm happy you're doing this class. This is a beautiful book, and my dandavats to you all.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Bimal. But I know that you've been studying Upadeśāmṛta very seriously, and in fact, you know, you're a big part of the inspiration behind this class, actually, because you gave a copy to Ananda Krishna Prabhu, and ever since then he's been like pushing me. Oh, we got to do Upadeśāmṛta class. We got to do Upadeśāmṛta class. So you're a direct causative factor behind this class, and very happy you could join in person today. We also have Krishna Shram. Do you know Bimal Krishna Prabhu? Okay, Krishna Shram was also in Salt Lake City for a while, but I think perhaps after you had already moved out. So yeah.
Dandavat Prabhu, Dandavat Ananda Prabhu. Yeah, I was probably already gone at that point. It's been a while since I've been in Salt Lake City, but my heart's always there. I always tell people I'm from Salt Lake City. I'm not a California boy now, but I'm always Salt Lake City in my heart. So, yeah, my dandavats.
Dandavat Bimal Prabhu. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiration. And I'm sure many of us will be following up with some of the things you mentioned there. Vishwabandhavi had his copy out, I saw. And no doubt others. Okay, well, should we close there for today? Or any last words from anyone?
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Vishaka Didi. Yeah, you're keeping us alive.
Oh,
And
thank you for sharing your presence with us. We're real happy to have you with us. Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai, Śrī Upadeśāmṛta ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Jai Gaur Premanande. Haribol. See you all next time. Let me, how do we stop this here? Okay.